Morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We'll begin with chapter 21, verse 24. Chapter 21, verse 24, a very famous verse in the Torah when it talks about damages that one inflicts upon another. Chapter 21, verse 24, ayin tachas ayin, an eye for an eye, shein tachas shein, a tooth for a tooth, yad tachas yad, a hand for a hand, regel tachas rogel, a foot for a foot. If you look now in Rashi, ayin tachas ayin, sime ein chavero no sein loads me eino. Based on the Gemara, Rashi says if a person were to blind someone else, one would not be blinded. One would pay the value of what it is to have an eye. Kamasha pichasu damav limkor b'shuk v'chein kulam v'lo natilas ever mamish. So this pasuk is not to be taken literally. That's what the Gemara very clearly concludes based on cross-referencing of various verses. It means that if a person injures someone's body part, they have to pay the monetary value for what it is worth to have that body part. That's what the Gemara says. Very interesting. Sforno over here. Sforno on pasuk Chaf Dalet. Ayin tachas ayin. Kach hayaroi k'fi adina gamur. She mida keneged mida. See, if I were to ask you what should be, so most of us would say, well, the Gemara is teaching us that what it should be is a person pays the monetary value of what it is they have the limb. That's what it should be. The Sforno says the pasuk is trying to teach us something else. That really measure for measure is the ideal way to approach things in this world, theoretically speaking. That's how God approaches things. And that theoretically speaking, if someone were to blind someone else, it would be fair that they should be blinded. Uba Kabbalah sheyishalem mamon. And yet, the Gemara explains that that's not what we do. We say money is paid instead. Why? Because of our limited ability to assess things appropriately. Maybe we won't exactly pay it back in kind. Maybe this other person depends on their eyesight much more than another person. Maybe this person has a physical job. There's a never-ending list of variables, and God can handle that kind of thing. We as people can't. So the Sforno says the halacha of the pasuk is we make a monetary assessment, but the Torah is conveying to us that theoretically speaking, a person should have done to them what they do to someone else, but we can never make that assessment to the T. It's an interesting thing to think about. As an aside, there are some commentaries who say that that's why the Torah prohibits vengeance. In other words, if a person wrongs someone else, is it so terrible to say if they wronged me, they should be wronged? Well, not necessarily, but the problem is what our inability to exact things appropriately, especially if it's us that it happened to. So just an interesting thing to think about. Okay, let's jump ahead now to chapter 22, verse 20. Chapter 22, verse 20. V'ger lo soneh v'lo silchatzenu. You should not afflict nor bring distress to a convert. Ki gerim hayisem be'eretz Mitzrayim, because you were converts in the land of Egypt. I'm all for being nice to people. And certainly converts, it's only appropriate we should be nice and respectful to the convert. What exactly is the logical flow of that verse? Because you were converts in Egypt, you should be nice to them. Okay? And by the way, and if you weren't converts in Egypt, who cares? I mean, we're used to the verse, but just if you think about it for a minute, what does that mean exactly? Let's start with Rashi. Rashi on Pasuk Chaf, first of all, just to get some technical points. The ger lo soneh unoas tvarim. This is really powerful. Rashi says, and Rashi says that what it means to not afflict the convert is not to say hurtful things. It's a powerful thing to think about, that if a person says a hurtful thing to a convert, they're violating a Torah prohibition. Many times we're not so sensitive about what we say. Many times we're much more interested in what we do. That's the first one. Lo sochatzenu, not to afflict. So what's the difference between hurting and afflicting? So Rashi citing the Mechilta says this is gzelas mamon, stealing from them. So you're not allowed to say hurtful things to a convert. You're not allowed to damage a convert monetarily. Ki gerim hayisem, because you were converts. Im honiso Av hu yachol noscha. If you were to say something hurtful, the convert could very easily turn it around on you. V'lomar lach, and say to you, Af atam migerim basa. Guess what? You're also a convert. You also descend from converts. Mum shebecha al tomar l'chavercha. If you carry some kind of sensitivity, you shouldn't be going and saying it to to someone else. So that's how Rashi explains the pasuk. Ramban and pasuk Chaf. Ki gerim yisem beretz Yisrael. Lo hochshu kol hagerim bavur Yosenu gerim beretz man vein tamshu muvtachim laolam bavur kein. Like the Ramban says, what does this mean? That because we happen to be converts, that makes it that every convert should be treated a certain way. What's that about? Pirush Rashi ki utam lo sonu oso. Rashi explains that it's the explanation why you shouldn't say hurtful things. As we said with Rashi, that if you say something hurtful, you can say something bad. The Ibn Ezra says, this is my guess of most of us would have said this. The Ibn Ezra says, how dare you say something? Don't you realize that you're sharing a similar past? But moving further in the Ramban says, I think the pshat is kiyomar lo sonu ger v'lo sochatzenu v'tachshavu she'en lo matzil miyatcha. If you meet a person who doesn't seem to have the family connections that other people have, and doesn't seem to have the connections to powerful people that anyone has. Yeah, that's true. My father, excuse me, it's not that we were converts in Egypt, it's that we were strangers in Egypt. Yes, excuse me. Yes, 100%. Thank you. In other words, you have to be sensitive to the plight of the convert who's the stranger among the people of Israel, because you were strangers. Yeah, excuse me. Thank you. Okay. So, but the Ramban says that, you might be tempted to be insensitive or cruel to someone who doesn't have family connections, who doesn't have powerful connections. And you might think to yourself, because what's he going to do to me already? Don't think that way, because you were strangers in Egypt. And the Egyptians thought that they could do whatever they wanted to you. Remember what I did to the Egyptians when they thought that nobody would be able to protect you from them? Don't forget that. I look out for the people. I look out for the underdog. I look out specifically for the people who are being persecuted. I'm always going to save people from those who are stronger than them. Okay. So that's an interesting shot from the Ramban. I just want to state for the record, this pasuk is speaking to an inappropriate instinct within people to try to manipulate people who have less connections than they do. We saw Rashi's pshat, the Ibn Ezra's pshat, and the Ramban's pshat as to why you shouldn't speak that way, why you shouldn't act that way. But I just want to say for the record, and it's not just me, whenever I talk about this in shul or the like, I look around the room, there are various people nodding quite emphatically. The general attitude, thank God, within our community, and I think within the broader Jewish community, is that we have the utmost admiration for people who have joined our nation, our faith, out of their own initiative. I have the schus to be on a Beis Din for conversion, and I frequently walk away from meetings with people and ask myself if I would have ever made that decision, if I would have ever had the conviction to make that decision, and the moral fortitude, or spiritual fortitude. So I'm sorry to state the obvious, but sometimes I think the obvious has to be stated. Okay. Moving on to verse 24. Im kesef talvei asami. If you are to lend money to people from my nation, and it's understood to be not an if, but when you lend money to members of Klal Yisrael, The impoverished person with you who needs money, lo sia lo kinoshe. Don't be on him like a creditor. Lo sisimuno of neshech. Don't charge him interest. If you take his garment as collateral, you should give it back to him when he needs it. A fascinating thing. So you might say, well, if he hasn't paid me back yet and he gave me something as collateral, I'll specifically hold it when he needs it. That'll be a motive for the person to pay me back. No, you hold the item as collateral, as a reminder, but whenever he needs it, even if it's just to use when he's sleeping at night, you give it back to him. Verse 26, this is something that he needs. What's he going to lie down with if he doesn't have this? And it will be when he calls out to me, Vishamati, I will listen, because I, God, am compassionate. Okay, very powerful mitzvah. What exactly is meant when he calls out to me, I'll listen because I'm compassionate? What do we mean by that? Let's just see the Ramban. Ramban and Pasuk Chava. Vishamati ki chanun ani, chonein umekabel tchinas kol adam. Afal pi she'enu hagun migzeras chinam. It's a very famous idea that manifests itself in different places in Chumash. The Ramban is saying that the word chanun, which is normally translated as compassionate, is related to the word chinam. Chinam means for free. So this poor person doesn't even have his warm blanket to sleep in at night because you took it back from him. He might pray to me in despair that he's in such a difficult situation, and it's you who put him in that very difficult situation. Understand that that prayer is a very potent prayer, even if he's not such a pious person, even if it's God listening, quote unquote, for free. It's not that he's done all these mitzvos. Still understand that his prayer is very powerful. You might say to yourself, I get it. I need to be compassionate to like the pious person who doesn't have much money, because I don't want to get on his bad side, because God's in his corner. And if he prays to God, God's going to punish me. But a regular guy, maybe not such a regular guy, maybe a guy who's not so good, I don't have to worry about him. We say, no, God hears the prayers of all, and certainly those people, as we've already said this morning, certainly those people who are in difficult circumstances. Okay. Sforno, I'm sorry, Sforno. I don't know what happened to the Sforno. It was here before. Yeah, I'm sorry, Sforno on Chafaf. Vishamati ki hanun ani, I will hear because I am compassionate. He has no right to actively complain about you. He owes you money. It's not like you're stealing from him. He owes you money and you're keeping the collateral. Mikamakom, kishayitzak elai alani yuso, hagorim lo yos arum beli levush al yotcha, etein lo ktsas mimasha yisichone no schach, yoser al sipuka kadesh tucha lefarnes ba'acherim. It's a really interesting Sforno. Sforno says, look, it's not like you did something fundamentally immoral. You didn't steal from him. You gave him money. And now he wants his blanket, but you don't want to give it back to him because you want him to be motivated to pay you. Says the Sforno, you have to understand something. I, God, have perhaps given you more than you deserve. And maybe my compassion to you is because I want you to be my proxy to share things with needy people in this world. And if you're not going to do that appropriately, then maybe you're going to lose what you would have gotten. So, whereas the Ramban just says, God always sticks up for the downtrodden, and you don't want God angry at you. The Sforno says a little bit differently. Maybe your ability to help this person is the reason you got the money in the first place. If you don't help the person appropriately, maybe your finances won't go so well. Not even as a punishment. Maybe that's why God's giving you the finances. An interesting perspective. So we discussed the Sforno this morning about eye for eye. We discussed Rashi, the Ibn Ezra, and Ramban regarding acting with compassion towards the convert. And we discussed Ramban and Sforno regarding why God says we have to make sure to act with compassion towards the impoverished person.